Welcome to history class. We are going to start our lecture now, so you should have your lecture notes out and ready to go. We're going to start with our two focus questions. What were the three major wars between Rome and Carthage called? These were the Punic Wars. That's a name you're going to need to remember, and we'll be covering the Punic Wars in this lecture. In which war did the Roman army face Hannibal's army? This was during the Second Punic War. There were three Punic Wars altogether, and Hannibal was involved in the Second Punic War. So Rome was trying to expand. They were trying to increase their empire. So why do you think the Romans wanted control over the Italian peninsula? They wanted to control the land and trade so that they could start to establish their empire. How were the Romans unlike other conquering people? The Romans were very different than other conquering people because they actually let the people that they conquered become citizens. They didn't make them be a lesser group of people. So the Greeks, the Latins, and the Etruscans were all offered citizenship as long as they didn't rebel. And last, why did the Romans fight Carthage? Rome wanted control of the Mediterranean Sea and the lands along the coast, and Carthage was their biggest opponent. So that brings us to the Punic Wars. The Punic Wars lasted 125 years, and during this time, Rome fought against Carthage, which is located in northern Africa. So if we go to our map, which is in our textbooks, I'll also pull up the map for you here. If you look down in the purple area near Africa, you see Carthage. Carthage is a city just like Rome, and both nations were trying to establish control and establish dominance of the Mediterranean Sea. So, both wars were against Carthage, and the wars lasted about 25 years. And if you look in your textbook at page 236, you'll see what one of the Greek authors said about the Punic Wars. Now, last. The Roman army was divided into legions, and a legion is a unit of soldiers, and that unit of soldiers is between 3,000 and 6,000 men. So a legion is a unit of soldiers, and it's between 3,000 and 6,000 men. Legion, unit of soldiers, between 3,000 and 6,000 men. All right, let's go on to the First Punic War. The First Punic War was only about a year long, and it was during the year 264 BC. And the reason that this Punic War started was because Rome wanted to be able to control Sicily. Let's go back to our map. Sicily is the island off of the boot of Italy. The climate was warm, and it also was a location that made it so that if Rome could control Sicily, Rome would have access to controlling all of the Mediterranean Sea. So it was a very important thing to be able to have. Also notice, Sicily is located in between Carthage and the Italian peninsula. Rome was afraid that if Carthage got control of Sicily, then Carthage would have an easy access point to the Italian peninsula and to Rome. So taking Sicily was kind of a strategy move for the Roman army. So Sicily had a very powerful navy. The Romans are not so well known for having a good navy. So Rome had to create an effective strategy in order to defeat the Carthaginian navy. So they developed a plank with a spiked tip that would attach to the enemy ship, and then the enemy ship wouldn't be able to get away, and the Roman soldiers would be able to run across the plank and board the Carthaginian ship. Who won the First Punic War? That's right, Rome did. Rome won the First Punic War by defeating the Carthaginian navy. So, the score in the Punic War battles is Rome 1, Carthage 0. So, First Punic War, Rome defeated the Carthaginian navy and won the war. All right, let's move on to the Second Punic War. The Second Punic War is the most famous of the 3 Punic Wars because of Hannibal. We'll get to him in just a minute. So, the Second Punic War began because Carthage violated the peace treaty between themselves and Rome. The Second Punic War began because Carthage violated the peace treaty. The Second Punic War started because Carthage violated the peace treaty with Rome by attacking a Spanish city that was an ally of Rome. Now, the Second Punic War, like I said, is famous because of Hannibal. Hannibal was a general for Carthage and one of the greatest generals in ancient history. Hannibal, a general for Carthage and one of the greatest generals in ancient history. Hannibal, general of Carthage, one of the greatest generals in ancient history. So you may ask, what was Hannibal's plan? Well, Hannibal's plan was to attack the areas around the city of Rome and he was hoping to get support of the country people. And that was his plan. It worked well at the beginning, but we'll see. It didn't work out altogether. So, back to our map. Hannibal started in Spain. So if you look at the map, Spain is over on the left-hand side. And he started by attacking the allies of Italy, or Rome, in Spain. Then, if you follow the purple line, he traveled up the coast, and then, if you see where Gaul is, and the Alps, Hannibal actually had to cross the Alps, which are giant mountains, in order to get into the Italian peninsula. So the Alps were a natural barrier that protected the Italian peninsula. There were several mountain passages that enemies could come through, and Hannibal was able to do that. But another defense for the Italian peninsula was in the south, down in the bottom part of the boot, there were high cliffs. So the Italian peninsula was very well protected. So Hannibal brought with him a whole bunch of war elephants. If you look at the picture in your textbook on page 238, you see that Hannibal and his war elephants are crossing the Alps. Hold on just one second. Do you usually think of elephants as being in the mountains? No, definitely not. So the war elephants were an effective weapon in ancient warfare. The elephant's main purpose was to charge and trample the enemy. It was difficult to cut through the elephant's thick hide with arrows or swords, and the elephant, because he was so tall, gave the riders an advantage and a good view of the battlefield. So that's probably why Hannibal wanted to bring his elephants with him when he attacked Rome. So let's get back to the Second Punic War. So, as we saw on the map, Hannibal started in Spain, and he kind of wanted to sneak up on the Romans. But to do that, he had to travel through the Alps. The Alps were cold, and there were other tribes that would attack him as he traveled through. So, once Hannibal got to where Rome was, he had a special strategy for attacking. He had his troops stand in a imagine a V shape pointing towards the enemy. And then, when the enemy charged, the V shape would collapse onto itself, and it created a trap. So then the enemy was surrounded on 3 sides by the Carthaginians. So things were going very well for Hannibal until Rome came up with a new strategy. And they sent General Scipio to attack Carthage. So Rome counterattacked. They're being attacked at home, so instead they decide to attack back. And Hannibal had to rush home to defend his city, leaving behind all of his victories that he had accomplished on the Italian peninsula. So, we end the Second Punic War, and Rome wins again. So the score now is Rome 2, Carthage 0. So, let's move on to the Third Punic War. This war happened in 149 BC. As if Carthage hadn't figured out that they weren't going to beat the Romans, they attacked Rome again. This war took 3 years. Carthage started it, but Rome finished it. After defeating Carthage, Rome destroyed the entire city of Carthage, sold the people into slavery, and then put salt in the land, in the soil, so that nothing else would be able to grow there. During this time also, Rome conquered the rest of Alexander the Great's empire and Greece. So by the end of the Third Punic War, Rome pretty much had control of the entire Mediterranean Sea, and they were on the way to controlling the world. So, by defeating Carthage and Greece, Rome controlled the trade and the area around the Mediterranean Sea. All right, a couple more questions to wrap up. Why did Rome not want Carthage to remain in control of Sicily? Rome was afraid that if Carthage controlled Sicily, it would have an easy attack route to Rome. Why did Hannibal invade regions of the Italian peninsula outside of Rome? Hannibal was hoping to get the people around the city of Rome to join him and be able to help him fight against Rome. And what did Rome do to Carthage at the end of the war? Rome destroyed the city of Carthage. All right, what was the cause of the Second Punic War? All together now. Carthage violated its treaty with Rome is why the Second Punic War started. And why was the Second Punic War the most famous? Who made it famous? I hope you said Hannibal, and he was a brilliant military leader of the Carthaginian army. Now, at the remainder of the class time, you're going to work with your shoulder partner on page 135 of your workbook, and that is going to give you information about Roman soldiers and their armor and how it compares to the armor of God.